excited to introduce him. This is Jamie Stine. Jamie Stine got his start as the head story analyst for the Sunshine Writers and Directors Labs. So Sundance? Did I say Sundance? Oh, boy. You know what? I thought I didn't need my glasses, but clearly I do. The Sundance Writers and Directors Lab, I knew that. The world-renowned mentorship program that has launched the careers of filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, P.T. Anderson, Ben Zeitlin, John Cameron Mitchell, Miranda July, and so many others. Jamie additionally recently completed his 4-year training as a core energetics practitioner and uses the healing modality to work with writers in individual sessions and group workshops to both break through their creative blocks as well as better understand the emotional, spiritual energy held by their scripts.
And we've only got half an hour, so I just want to introduce to you 5 basic points to get your creative engines running. As indicated in my bio, my passion and my intention as a script consultant, and whatever you want to call me, is to help writers tell the deep stories that are in their hearts. And the reason why this connects so intensely and strongly with the notion of character is because characters are the vessels for the stories you want to tell. A movie, idea, a premise, a theme on their own, these are just intellectual, abstract concepts. It's pieces of paper. But it's a character that brings a movie, an idea, a theme to living, breathing life. And the fact of the matter is, when you think about your favorite movies, more likely than not, when you're thinking about the experience of it and how it makes you feel, you're thinking about the experience of being with that main character or set of characters. And this is usually even true for mainstream, high-concept movies. You know, you think about Indiana Jones, and the tone, color, texture of that movie takes its cue from this character. Characters are fun. You know, every time I start watching a movie in preparation for a workshop or a class or client I'm working with, I'm always struck anew by the fact that the character is truly the vehicle for the movie's underlying spirit. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to just review 5 really simple points to help you think about not just writing a memorable, great character as an abstract idea, like any memorable or great character, but the right memorable and great character for your specific story that you're wanting to tell. So I'm just going to jump right into it since we only have a little bit of time. The first point that I want to make about the dynamic, memorable character, and really, if I had to summarize this whole talk in one sentence, this would be it. The dynamic, memorable main character has an incredibly strong, incredibly specific, and incredibly clear emotional point of view. And they have an undying commitment to it. I really feel like I cannot stress this enough, so I'm just going to say it one more time for good measure. The dynamic, memorable character that is the right character to carry a film has an incredibly strong, clear, and committed emotional point of view. When you think of a movie like Sideways, usually when I talk about Sideways a lot. I love talking about Sideways because it was such a success, and it so flies in the face of conventional thinking when it comes to screenwriting. And when I usually bring it up, people often smile because they have this really sort of fun memory of having seen that movie. And really what they're thinking about and what they're smiling about is the experience of being with Paul Giamatti's character, Miles. And when you think about Miles, this is a man who is absolutely obsessed with a bottle of Pinot Noir. And he's obsessed more specifically with the Pinot Noir grape. He describes this grape as finicky, as temperamental, it's high maintenance, it's stubborn, it requires so much great care, it requires patience. And only for the people who are willing to give that care and patience can its true brilliance be unleashed and savored. So obviously he's talking about himself. You know, this is a man who is stubborn, finicky, temperamental, and he's obsessively, compulsively negative. He has an obsession with perfection, whether it's the perfect marriage that's now gone. He lost his wife 2 years ago. He has an obsession with the perfect bottle of wine. He has an obsession with what the perfect novel that he needs to labor for 7 years needs to look like. And he's all about using that perfectionism to really stay out of his life, to sabotage himself, to not see the good of today, to dig his heels into the ground, and to stay stuck in the past. He is so committed to this, it shows up in every single thing that he does in this movie. Every moment of his on-screen life is dedicated to this viewpoint. You see it in his shabby clothes that he wears because he can't go out there and provide a real career for himself. You see it in the shabby apartment he's living in. You see it in the way he passive-aggressively runs late so that everything's dramatic. You see it in the way that he sabotages this potentially redeeming relationship he has with this new woman. There isn't a single moment where he's not in some way committed in expressing this viewpoint. Similarly, if you think about a movie like Devil Wears Prada, that's another one that generally gets a smile from people when I start talking about it. And they're smiling really because they're remembering the experience of being with Miranda Priestly, played by Meryl Streep. It's sort of a legendary contemporary role. And again, this is a woman who from beginning to end of this movie so completely embodies the emotional viewpoint of professional perfectionism, success at all costs, doing anything you need to do to get the best job done. And it informs every single thing that she does in this movie. The high fashion that she wears, her sort of iconic, stylish haircut that she has. It's in the way that she puts her work in front of her family. It's in the way that she treats her employees and inspires fear and intimidation into them. There's not a single moment on screen where she is not fully embodying this emotional viewpoint. So this is really important because, as I said before, characters really are the vessel for the spirit of your movie. So Erin Brockovich is a scrappy, defiant, righteous kick in the ass to the system because Erin Brockovich, the character, is a scrappy, defiant, righteous underdog who gives the system a kick in the ass. The Hurt Locker is a raw, tense, adrenaline-infused, dramatic character study because Jeremy Renner's character in that movie is a raw, intense man who is addicted to the thrill of battle. So when you have a character who embodies a clear emotional point of view with specificity and commitment, the underlying thematic, dramatic energy of your so is coming to life in front of us, and we're having a kind of flesh and blood experience of it. I think it's also very, just so you know, I'm just looking at the time, because otherwise, if I don't look though, I'll just go on and on. What I want to say is that they will take it so far. There are these sort of iconic moments that you really remember when you're watching the movie. I think about the moment in Sideways when Thomas Hayden Church says to Miles, you got to be willing to drink Merlot if these girls that we're going on a date with want to drink Merlot. And Miles, furious, just says, I am not drinking the fucking Merlot. And I remember, people laugh now, and I remember being in theaters and people were laughing. It's that moment in Thelma and Louise where Thelma is going to rob a convenience store and love doing it because she's all about freedom and letting loose. The more that the hero is willing to sort of let all bets be off and just go for broke for their emotional viewpoint, the more the spirit is coming to life with depth and specificity and excitement. So I actually put some questions, you have a handout, just some questions to get you thinking about your hero that you can take with you back home. But right here, what is your hero's deep, committed, emotional viewpoint? What is it that your hero values above all else? It's this idea that if you take away this emotional viewpoint from your character, you're taking away sort of the very essence of who they are. They cannot exist without this viewpoint because it's so intrinsic to their identity. And how does this point of view show up in every facet of his or her life? So that's the first point. The second point that comes to mind when thinking about character is that the dynamic, memorable character is incredibly good at what he or she does. And I mean this on two levels. One, this is the general level of being an agent of their emotional point of view, of getting it out there, of having people fall in line, of fighting on behalf of what they believe in. And then I also mean it in a second way, which is that they tend to have a very specific skill set that they're very good at. So, for example, someone like Jeremy Renner in The Hurt Locker, he's really good at walking the line between life and death. You know, he knows how to get that done. He is a man who breaks the rules, he shows up, he becomes a star of the show, he pisses people off, he makes people have to scramble to accommodate his sort of impromptu method of resolving a situation, and he's constantly feeding on intensity. Even back in his bunk, you know, he's getting into barbaric fights with his fellow soldiers. But he's also a really good bomb detonator. He is really good at what he does, and so much of the excitement comes from the specificity of seeing him be an expert at his trade. It's a very similar thing with Miranda Priestley, The Devil Wears Prada. She's really good at bulldozing her way through the professional working world. Like I said, she inspires fear, she inspires intimidation. She also gets people to be at the top of their absolute game. She runs a tight ship, and that leads to her skill set. She is great at running this magazine, and we love watching it. She's so good at running the magazine, in fact, that she's actually a kind of fashion icon in and of herself. She predicts and creates trends. She's good at what she does. Even someone who's self-destructive like Miles is good at what he does. He's good at ruining a good time. He's good at making people have to sort of gather around and accommodate his melodrama. He's very effective in that way. And he's also great with wine. He's got this extraordinary refined palate and nose. And again, the movie comes to life with the specificity of what he's good at. This is important for a few reasons. First of all, there's just something fun about watching people who are very good at what they do, and it immediately makes your hero active. You know, you're not going to have a character who's sitting around static, expositionally saying, oh hey, you know what, this is what I believe in. When you think about your hero being good at getting their viewpoint out there and making the world fall in line, they're immediately going to be active. They are taking action. The other important thing about this is that if your hero is good at what he or she does, you are forced then to create formidable conflict that stands a chance of providing reasonable opposition. If your hero isn't good at what he does, you're never really pressed into creating high-stakes conflict. So, in a way, having an active hero who's going to be a good agent of plot, you've sort of built in a guarantee for yourself that you're going to create a high-stakes drama. Even if it's an understated drama or not an understated drama, you're guaranteeing you have to come up with the necessary stakes to knock your hero flat on their ass, which will make them dig deep into their resources, which gives you those moments when Miles is saying, I'm not going to drink the fucking Merlot, which gives you those moments when Velma's robbing up a liquor store with glee and reckless abandon. So your hero should be good at what they do. So the questions I have here is, how is your hero great at what he does? Has he successfully inflicted his worldview on everyone around him? What are the tools of his particular trade? And what actual practical skill set does your hero have? What is your hero really good at? And pay attention to that in movies. Really notice when you see those specifics of someone plying their trade, there's just something genuinely, inherently compelling about that. And it roots you into the world in a way that very few other things do. So the third point I want to make about memorable characters is that there's generally a vein of truth, a vein of real truth in what the dynamic, memorable character believes. There's this great scene in The Devil Wears Prada where Anne Hathaway is watching Stanley Tucci and Meryl Streep sort of bustle around the office and worry about all the little details of the clothes. And she snickers because she thinks it's ridiculous. And as an audience, we're sitting there snickering with her. And Meryl Streep pretty much just does an about face and basically just sort of lays her flat and lets her know why this seemingly ridiculous decision actually has a huge sphere of influence for the fashion industry, which is a huge industry, and that influence trickles down into the world of commerce, and it actually affects Anne Hathaway, who likes to think that she's above it all. It's a really great dynamic scene because Meryl Streep, suddenly her character just suddenly has a new facet that she didn't have. She's not just this over-the-top bitch. She's someone worth taking seriously. And above and beyond that, there's a real sort of jolt of electricity, I think, that happens when people stand in sort of authentic truth. We really are drawn to that. You know, that's why we tend to often like truth tellers in film and television, even when they're kind of not so nice people. You know, I'm thinking now of like Carla in Cheers, you know, or Cordelia in Buffy. You know, they have this way of sort of calling it like it is, and it might sting, but there's also just such a charge that you get out of that. Even someone like, say, Thomas Hayden Church in Sideways, who plays, you know, Paul Giamatti's randy, lustful best friend, you know, he's generally presented as this sort of crude, self-interested, deceitful man who doesn't have a lot of, let's say, moral fiber. But there's a way in which that voice that he has a vein of truth, because he's the one who says, in his own simple way, like, gee, Miles, you know, if you just stop being so negative, you could actually have a good time. If you actually sat down with these women and sort of let yourself have fun with them, that could really change your life. Wow, you've got so many skills, why don't you just open up a wine bar? And it's in those moments where his sort of otherwise, I don't want to call it stupidity, but his otherwise sort of crass demeanor and his bluntness, it actually carries a vein of truth. I think it's really important also because, as we discussed, the characters are the vessels for the movie's underlying conflict, and they're the ones who are acting out the conflict. So in a way, just from a logic perspective, you want your strong, memorable characters to be loaded with some kind of legitimacy. Otherwise, the central conflict of your story doesn't really hold much weight. You know, in The Devil Wears Prada, just to take it to a broader level, there is a point that Miranda Priestley makes at the end of the movie when she says to Anne Hathaway in the limo, "Everyone wants to be us." You know, it's true. In a way, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people want to be them, and there's a lifestyle that they have that is very glamorous, and, you know, even Andy, I mean, that's the struggle in the movie. Do I give my all for the sake of work and career? So every viewpoint has to have some vein of truth to it in order to get your movie's central conflict on its feet. So the questions for this are just, what is that vein of truth in what your hero believes? What is it that your hero knows and is willing to say that no one else is willing to say? And in what way is your hero willing to cut through all the usual BS? These are characters who are willing to really take a stand and not go down gently. Okay, so the fourth point about writing a strong, memorable character is that a dynamic character walks a tightrope between thrilling success and high-stakes failure. You're constantly walking a tightrope between high-stakes success and high-stakes failure. Another way of saying this is that the character's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. So you think about a character like Jeremy Renner in The Hurt Locker, you know, and his greatest strength is his ability to go into any situation with complete gusto, with complete self-confidence, with complete courage, and get it diffused, literally and figuratively. And he, like we said, he's great at it, and he inspires his fellow soldiers to heights of courage and bravery they wouldn't otherwise ever have. But there's also a huge weakness in that, which is that he's reckless. He has very little regard for his own life or for the lives of the people around him. And every move he makes, yes, it stands a chance of really resolving the situation in a thrilling way, but it also stands a chance of literally blowing up in his face. This is true of so many of these characters. Even someone like Erin Brockovich, who stands, you know, more on the right side of what we might call morality. She's got a very righteous crusade. She's not self-destructive in the way that Jeremy Renner is in Hurt Locker or the way that Paul Giamatti is in Sideways, but her greatest strength is also her greatest weakness. Her greatest strength, of course, lies in the fact that she won't take no for an answer. Her greatest strength lies in the fact that she will not let any wrong go unpunished. Her greatest strength is that she will bulldoze for the sake of what's right, but it's also her greatest weakness. She has a temperament that often blows up in her face, and by the end of the movie, she's actually alienated her boyfriend. She's actually alienated her children. She's actually alienated the people who are coming to help support her with this case. And she almost isolates herself off the case that means so much to her. And even on a bigger level, it's her desire to go big for the big lawsuit that creates a situation where these plaintiffs might walk away with absolutely nothing. So there's this real fine line between the strengths that they're bringing to the table and also the capacity for losing everything that means so much to them. You know, and the reason why this is important, I think it speaks for itself, but this is creating a high-stakes, danger-laden portrayal. So your story is immediately infused with the kind of dramatic danger that's going to make for a very compelling battle of war in your central conflict. So the questions I had here is just, how is your hero's greatest strength also her greatest weakness? What is the fatal flaw in your hero's emotional crusade that constantly threatens to undermine everything that she stands for and believes in? And so the last point I want to leave you with today is the idea that the dynamic character is ultimately human. And by that I mean vulnerable. And I feel like this is, it pretty much speaks for itself. These characters, the kind of characters we've been talking about today, like Erin Brockovich and Jeremy Renner and Miles and Sideways and Miranda Priestley and Devil Wears Prada, these are larger than life characters. These are colorful people. You're not going to necessarily go down to the corner store and run into these people doing your everyday lives. But the reality of the situation is they're still motivated by and haunted by very vulnerable, relatable, universal struggles. Erin Brockovich might show very atypical and unusual resolve in her quest, but the fact of the matter is she's coming from a place of deep wounding. She's been abandoned by her husband. She's been left to raise 3 kids on her own. She's got no money to support herself, and she wants to make something of her life. She wants to be able to still have contributed something meaningful even though the odds are against her. It's a very vulnerable thing. Even Miranda Priestley in Devil Wears Prada, by the end of that movie, her husband is filing for divorce. And there's this great moment where Anne Hathaway, shares with her, where we see that she does process the price that she's paid for putting her career above all else. So these feelings of vulnerability, this frailty, it obviously makes these characters, it brings them down to earth and grounds them in a human experience. And it just makes them, for lack of a better word, relatable. I don't like that word. I think what makes the character relatable is just when they're committed to what they believe in with everything that they've got, which is what we've been talking about. But for lack of a better word, it makes them, it takes the larger-than-life palette and it brings it back to a place where, we can certainly identify with what's going on with them emotionally. So I only have a few minutes left. Yeah, so if there are any questions, I'd love to field them.
We just have time for a couple of questions for Jamie, if anyone has any.
Yeah.
So, as you're developing a main character, so to speak, would you physically be able to write down those traits of all of these points before you begin? Almost like outlining your main character before you start outlining the story, so to speak?
I mean, I want to say do what works for you. Ultimately, this is a creative process. This is your barometer. Are you having fun? You want to be excited about writing this character, and there's a reason why it's coming through you, both for the script and for you, because we're writing ourselves in our scripts, even if people are completely different from us. So I think what's most important, this is what I want to say, is to really connect with the energy and spirit of it. And so maybe that's something you feel in your body and you're ready to go. Maybe that's something you want to do in a monologue. I like these questions. They're touchstones to help inspire you to drop in that place where you feel this voice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Jamie Stine.